by clergymen are speaking out tonight on the steps of the Davidson County Courthouse.
The group is making some strong accusations against the Jehovah's Witnesses. The group claims the church is paying victims for their silence and continuing the cycle of abuse. News Channel 5's Scott Arnold reports.
I was molested by a teenager who was a member of my church.
On courthouse steps,
and I want it to stop. I want it to stop.
frank talk about a problem often not talked about in public.
So I was told to protect the person who actually abused me instead of me being protected. This man went on to molest other little children.
Members of the group called Silent Lambs,
And I am an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and I am an abuse survivor.
claim Jehovah's Witnesses are continuing a cycle of abuse within the church.
We learned that 16 victims were paid the largest settlement in history of Jehovah's Witnesses, but forced to sign a gag order that forbids them from speaking about their abuse.
The group believes gag orders keep the predator's identity a secret, letting them continue a path of abuse.
If you see this man in the public, report him to the police.
Case in point, Rick McLean, a Jehovah's Witness elder from California, who the group claims was involved in a number of recent sex abuse lawsuits, but never named in any of them.
It is so important that survivors or victims come forward for their own healing and to give affirmation to others that they're not alone.
These people here behind me are victims of abuse by Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics, and other Protestant denominations.
Silent Lambs may be unhappy with church policy they cannot change,
I believe that other children will be harmed.
but what they can do is get their message out.
My parents nor anyone else ever knew that I was abused by an elder in the congregation.
A message that when it comes to sexual abuse, silence can be deafening.
And I want it to stop.
Scott Arnold, News Channel 5.
In response, Jehovah's Witnesses say, quote, "We will continue to do our utmost to protect children from the..."
Well, victims of this kind of abuse say it is the worst kind. People of faith preying on people who pray. The group Silent Lambs was in Nashville today showing their support for people who say they've been abused by Jehovah's Witnesses and others. Recently, lawsuits were settled in some cases, but not to the satisfaction of Silent Lambs. Channel 4's Cynthia Williams is live now at Kingdom Hall in West Nashville with the story. Cynthia?
Well, there are about 6 Kingdom Halls in the Nashville area, including the one here in West Nashville that's over my shoulder. And today, Silent Lambs attached this bulletin to the door of each one. At least that attempt was made.
So recently 16 lawsuits were settled.
Who called you?
Silent Lambs met with vocal resistance today at a Kingdom Hall in Woodbine.
You haven't been invited on the property.
For 6 years now, the Kentucky-based organization has offered support for people alleging abuse within the Jehovah's Witnesses faith. In March, settlements were reached in more than a dozen molestation cases, agreements that came with gag orders attached.
We find this bittersweet. On one hand, we're glad a few victims were finally getting some financial help, but on the other hand, we're sad and worried because they've been forced to give up their right.
Bill Bowen is a former Jehovah's Witness and founder of Silent Lambs. He was surrounded by abuse victims today from various faiths.
When I was around 8 years old, I was molested by a teenager who was a member of my church, Christian Gospel Temple.
There are thousands of us out there and thousands of children that need our help right now.
My parents nor anyone else ever knew that I was abused by an elder.
According to Silent Lambs, the Jehovah's Witnesses policies encourage abuse by not reporting allegations to police, choosing instead to handle individual cases internally. Today, a stuffed lamb was placed on the doors of area Kingdom Halls, telling victims they need be silent no more. And victims groups say that they are critical of these gag orders because they tend to keep the identity of the predator secret while re-victimizing the victim. Live in West Nashville, I'm Cynthia Williams, Channel 4 News.
The Jehovah's Witnesses headquarters in Brooklyn was supposed to send a faxed response today, but as of news time, we had not received any.
We're back with NBC News In Depth tonight, an exclusive investigation into yet another religious organization hit with sexual abuse allegations. The Jehovah's Witnesses have settled 9 lawsuits alleging church policies protected men who abused children for many years. In settling, the church did not acknowledge wrongdoing. Now, evidence has surfaced that leaders did know about some of the men, but apparently never informed authorities. Our senior investigative correspondent, Lisa Myers, has our exclusive report tonight in depth.
Frederick McLean is among the country's most wanted fugitives, accused of molesting children for almost a decade.
His typical victims were young girls, I think starting around 5 or 6 years old.
Authorities say McLean, who restored race cars, was a respected leader in this congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses.
His role in the church was significant because we believe that his participation in the church gave him access to his victims.
The Jehovah's Witnesses recently agreed to pay to settle a lawsuit that alleged the church knew or should have known McLean was a pedophile. One of 9 similar cases church headquarters settled without admitting wrongdoing.
But internal church records now coming to light in those lawsuits show that the church knew for years that some prominent members were sexually abusing children and did little.
Example, James Henderson. Documents showed the church knew he was abusing kids as early as the 1970s and stripped him of his leadership role for a while, but apparently never alerted police. He was finally arrested in 1994 and went to prison, having molested children for 2 decades. Another church leader, Alvin Hurd, confessed to the church in 1981 that he'd abused 3 children, ages 5, 9, and 11. His local congregation kicked him out and alerted church headquarters. But again, the church apparently never notified police. Hurd, now in prison, admits he molested other children until 2003.
The policies and procedures enacted by Jehovah's Witnesses protect pedophiles rather than protect the children.
Barbara Anderson, a former Jehovah's Witness, is an outspoken critic of the church on this issue. She says the church prefers to keep an abuser's confession confidential, treating abuse more as a sin than as a crime.
They do not report child abuse to the authorities unless it's mandated by a state for the clergy to do so.
The church declined to speak on camera, but in a statement wrote that it does not condone or protect child molesters, that cases within the church are rare, that members have the right to report the crime to authorities, and that church elders comply with child abuse reporting laws. But not all states require clergy to report child sexual abuse. That means some abusers get caught only if victims finally come forward, like Frederick McLean's accusers, who now want this alleged molester taken off the streets. Lisa Myers, NBC News, Washington.